Okay, thanks.
Good idea.
All right. So Reese will be back, but not tonight. He couldn't do 2 consecutive weeks, so we're just going to have to keep multiple topics in our minds for this period. Okay, so 4 radical Jewish ideas. So the first radical Jewish idea that we spoke about, I guess 2 weeks ago, was the role of Torah study in Judaism. It's something really distinct from other religions as far as I know, something really distinguishable about Judaism and the Jewish approach to religion than other ways of thinking. This today, I think it's sort of a little bit different. We're going to focus on this notion of humanity being in God's image, a sort of foundation for religious humanism, and I'm going to try to argue that this is not something that distinguishes Judaism from other ways, other religions, other ways of being, but actually this is something that was foundational to the modern world, and that maybe some ideas that come from Hebrew Bible, this role of humanity in the divine image is perhaps an animating force in much of the modern world. Okay, that's sort of the thesis I'm going to try to present. Of course, you're free to disagree, and we can have like a lot of discussion on that. Okay, so I threw a lot of sources on here, but hopefully we can discuss them. Okay, so first source. Okay, Vayivra Elohim et Adam b'Tzelmo, b'Tzelem Elohim bara oto, zechar nekeva bara otam. So that's sort of unpacking that. This Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. God created man in His image, b'Tzelmo, in God's image, b'Tzelem Elohim, in the image of God, bara oto, He created him. Zachar nekeva bara otam, and then male and female they were created. So what are some questions we have, and what are some implications of this verse? Shalom.
It seems like the wording seems a little convoluted and redundant.
Can you explain?
God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created him.
Good.
It could have been said a lot shorter and fewer words.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's a good. So the question is, what's the meaning of all this redundancy? Other questions? Rachel?
Why it starts in singular and ends in plural?
Yes. It's Adam b'Tzelmo. Adam is singular, and then bara otam. Thank you. Right. Exactly. Right. In the image of God, He created him, and then male and female, He created them. Right. Good. That's a great question. Anne, you had a comment or question? That was your question. Good. Okay. So, yeah?
What is the image of God?
Good. Yeah. What does the image of God mean? So, what would you suggest? What would you think that would mean?
I don't know, by a lot of David says
Right. How could you be the image of God? Right. So maybe it doesn't mean. So maybe it doesn't mean our bodies. Maybe it means something like we can't even think. Right. It couldn't be our bodies. Right. So it has to be something else, some other capacity about our dignity or our Rabbi talks about our conscience, our ability, our rational capacity. Right. You could think of like things that are distinctly human, and maybe that's what we would identify.
Another question is the gender, the movement from singular masculine to male and female.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you're right. The others had focused on singular oto to otam, but it's also oto seems masculine, and then otam is explicitly not masculine. Zachar nekeva, right? So I don't know. If you were to ask I would say men and women are both equally in creating the image of God. That seems to be part of the point the verse is making. I don't think that's a stretch. You can argue with me, but I think that's actually the point the verse is making. Some creation of humanity. Adam b'Tzamo, God created man in His image. That man really I would translate as humanity in God's own image, and male and female are both equally in the image of God. And so whatever about us is in the image of God, somehow men and women are equally in that image. So either it's something, again, not about our physical body, something about our rational capacity, our conscience, something like our inherent dignity, or if it's something about our bodies, it's something that, men and women,
Yeah, I mean,
God has two legs and 2 arms just like we do, right?
Well, I think that the pshat of the text, there's no reason why you wouldn't assume that.
Why wouldn't you assume that it's the body,
His
right?
image. I mean, it says in fact it created it.
Right, so tselem, I don't know, whatever that word means.
Whatever it means.
It could mean something very concrete. It could
is,
mean,
in fact.
Good. And, Yes, we'll see sources that even go in that direction. Absolutely. Rachel.
I would also say Tselem, the word, doesn't really mean in the image of. It means like a shadow of, or like some semblance to. And so like when we translate it as in the image of, we think, oh, God has an image and God has something concrete. But the wording doesn't necessarily mean
Tzel is a shadow. Tzel has some implication of shadow. So what would that mean? What would the difference be? Well,
the difference between being created.
in the image of God and the shadow of God, yeah.
I mean, I can imagine that metaphorically being created in the shadow of doesn't mean that you are identical, but it means you have certain things that evoke the other, the thing of which it is a shadow.
Yeah. So you know, I have a teacher of mine who says, it's not that we, when the Torah speaks about, anthropomorphic language, God's hand, God's arm, it's not that that's a metaphor, it's that, no, God has an arm, we have metaphors, which is sort of like you were saying, right? We have, which I think is really, like an arm is like instrument for shaping things and moving things, so God has an arm, we have metaphors, we have like shadows of arms, right? Your comment evoked that teaching. Okay. Source two, okay? Shafech, this is a few verses later in Breshit. Shafech dam hadam, badam demo yishafech. Okay, one who sheds human blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God, was Sad Hadam, was humanity created. Okay, again, I think we could continue to say Hadam here means humanity. So one who spills human blood has to be punished. The source sheets are on the Shulchan. Welcome. One who sheds blood, he's punished right? Because God is man is creating him. So let's unpack that a little bit. What Anne?
It also it says again Adam. It specifies the man.
Which you think means?
Well, in the first one, it could be since Adam was created, and then Chava after could be he created Adam, and then since Chava was taken from Adam, she by necessity was also created in the image of the shadow.
But that's not what it says in the first verse here.
In which
She's not, in the first verse here, she was not taken from Adam, they were created together.
That's
Right. In Genesis 1, which is source 1.
They were created at the same time, not necessarily together.
Either way, she wasn't taken, like this is the first pair, and that's the second pair.
So, I mean, you could read this as two different stories completely, or you could harmonize the stories and say the second parak is just the details of the first parak, in which case Anne's interpretation works. So then how would you understand source 2, though, where it says Ha'adam the, right? What would that mean then? Because this is sometime later.
Yeah,
Because it's retrospective, harkening back.
But if you're going to interpret the first plus of that way, then the second one doesn't entirely.
So I think look, this is the first time. It's the second time in the first time in the Torah that the phrase Tselem Elokim is repeated. Okay, right? Humanity being created in God's image is repeated in source 2. This is the first time that it's introduced in Genesis chapter 1. Chapter 9, the same phrase is repeated, and it's used as an explanation for something. Right? We have to punish murder because humanity is created in the image of God. So somehow, I don't know, I would say, like, what is the implication of humanity being in the image of God? It means that human life has tremendous value, such that we are punishing murder in a very severe way. You could say, I don't know, maybe, capital punishment, maybe it cuts both ways because you're killing the murderer. So how much human life can't be worth that much if you're killing the murderer. So I think there's a little footnote. You have to put an asterisk. But maybe the verse kind of somehow undermines itself or it negates itself a little bit. But
Say you should kill him.
Ba'adamod, it does, I think, right? Ba'adam demo yishapech, right? You by man his blood shall be shed, like meaning one who sheds human blood, the human should kill him. I think that's what. I think it's the shot. I think. You wanna?
I was just going to say that in the context, it's a distinguishing between permissible killing and impermissible killing. So you're allowed to kill animals, but you're not allowed to kill humans. So we're beginning to distinguish what is humanity.
Chapter 9, right? This chapter of Breshit is about. Oh, very good, very very good, right? Where humanity is given this special role over over creation in this chapter. We can kill animals. Animal life doesn't have this total value. So we are ultimate value, but we can't kill people. We can't kill people. Yes.
If it wanted to say you can't kill people because they're made in the image of God, why didn't it just say that? It says, whoever kills somebody other men should kill
Yeah.
him or will kill him. Because it seems like it's trying to say something else.
So what's it trying to say?
I think it's like it's a mirroring. It's a I don't know how to say it elegantly, but it's like a V, right? The Adams meet up, and Adam meets up, and the Shafech meets up. So it's like a tit for tat. They're like mirror, like what you do will be done to you.
Oh yeah, it's
Like the language mirrors that significance.
it's a chiastic structure. That's what's 1, 2, 3, 3. Yeah. Shafech, dam, hadam, adam, demoy, shafech. Yeah. You have 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. It's a right. Chiastic structure. It's like a chi is in Greek is an X, so it's like when the two meet. So this verse is the first bit, right? So let's. So you have chiastic. So shafech is element 1. The word shed. Dam is element 2, and then adam, person, is element 3. So shafech, dam, hadam, one who sheds human blood. It's 1, 2, 3, and then you have ba'adam, through another person, damo, his blood, shall be shed. That's 3, 2, 1. So with a chiastic structure, the piece in the middle is supposed to be the most important one. So what's it emphasizing? Humanity, ba'adam, right? So shedding human blood is like this ultimate crime, and then it has to be responded to in an ultimate way. Because humanity is created in the image of God. So maybe you could say, in God's image, our lives have this ultimate value, and also in God's image, we can take another life sometimes, right? That's sort of like we can act like God and cause another human being's death in this, exercise of judgment. So maybe that's the point of the verse. So it's an ultimate value of human life, and this tremendous power given to us that we can sort of intervene in this way.
Just taken by itself, this is a recipe for endless killing, right? Because the people that killed, the second person that killed the first person deserves to be killed by a third person.
So it requires some sort of system of justice, some sort of system of authority. Otherwise, it's like it's an endless cycle of violence. It's true, and you're right. Agreed. Yeah.
I was going to say that, perhaps trying to understand why we see here again this element of kings. Okay, so there's consequences for our actions, especially for killing someone. It's almost evoking the idea of one justice, the action, there's a reaction, and almost even mercy as well, in the sense that it's saying, okay, don't do this. There's value to life, so let's be merciful. But then also there's justice for our actions. So I'm wondering if we can kind of tease out why we see that again, where the image of God asking.
In terms of the question some had, is it a literal, is it our bodies are in God's image? Is it some other capacity about us that's in God's image? Does this verse shed light on that, or can you interpret it either way? I think either way. You can say like the human life, like the physical bodies, right? You shed blood, that's like this ultimate crime because some of our bodies are in God's image, kilu. Or no, like whatever our capacity are, we have our rational capacity, our conscience, right? If that is harmed in some way, like so that's the seriousness of killing a person. Okay, so let's move on to source 3. This is going back a little bit, but this uses the phrase maybe, and this sort of speaks about humanity in a different way. This is the context. We saw this verse. This is the context of source 1. Okay, so God said, "Let us make man in our image and in our likeness." So we have another word here. It's selim, and we also have demut. So we have whatever selim means. You also have to figure out what demut means. There's image and likeness, or shadow and form. V'yirdu b'dgat hayam v'shamayim v'hema v'chol haaretz v'chol haremes harames al haaretz, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over the cattle and over the earth and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So here, this selim and demut, this special capacity of humanity, is linked to our dominion over creation. Okay, so this seems different. So if we're keeping track, which we should, of the implications of selim elokim, of this humanity in God's image, I would suggest really seeing two things. One, there is an ultimate value on human life. Two, there is a right to own things. Ownership is part of our being created in God's image. We own things and have dominion over the created world. Seem fair? Any pushback?
But there's also something special about blood, even in the animal kingdom, right? You're not allowed to eat blood.
Good. So there are limits. There are limits. There are limits. We'll get to limits in a minute. There are definitely limits. All rights have limits. But if we were going to translate this into kind of political language, we would say, maybe you could say, these verses in Genesis portray humanity as having a right to life and having a right to property. I think that's a fair reading. Unless you think it's too much, you can push back. Rachel is giving me skeptical looks.
I don't see property in there, but.
Dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, the cattle over the earth. What does it mean to have dominion over the earth? Collective ownership?
It's private property, I mean,
And control without ownership. You can use, but you can't actually own, like the Native Americans who just, according to the stories I was told when I was young, who just lived with nature and didn't own things. They had dominion over the earth without owning it.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay?
I might say, though, that there are situations in which you could have dominion but not ownership. Like, people who have political power have dominion over other people but don't own them.
Mm-hmm.
Or the FDA regulates food and drugs and therefore has dominion over food and drugs, but they don't own all food and drugs.
Right, you can have dominion over something you don't own.
But this is before the apple, so this is probably something that.
Maybe we lost this?
After that sin,
Okay.
we no longer have.
Well, we know, look, the Torah does have, the Torah, has rules about, against stealing. The Torah has rules against, you have to pay people their wages. The Torah says you can't, if you damage something, you have to pay for it. So that all presumes a certain, regimen of ownership, right? So if we were to go back to Genesis, we could say, meaning, if I have a prohibition against stealing from you, that suggests that you have a right to own your stuff, to some extent. Limited, but some basic ownership over something. And if we go, therefore, I think it's fair to look at these verses in Genesis and say that part of our being in the image of God, as portrayed in this verse, is some dominion over creation, which I think can include a right to property as well, ownership of things. Again, the whole rest of halachic history is limits and qualifications of those rights. And all of these rights have limits, but yeah?
If we're created in God's image, and we're saying we have ownership or dominion over property and animals, is that suggestive that God has dominion over property, animals, and us, or
Yes,
what's
yes.
the...
I think it's exactly the suggestion. God is ultimately dominion over everything, but we have a little bit, I think that is a suggestion. Aaron?
I think this tells us that we can use animals in the earth. I think about farming. We're on this earth and they don't necessarily have free will in that situation, but we do.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have needs, humans, to live on this earth, to eat, and we might organize a group of animals in order to be able to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
Farming or using them for riding a horse or...
Right. We use animals in a way that we couldn't use another person without their consent. Animals don't have to give consent, or they can't give consent, and that also comes from this. But yeah, okay, so that's right. So you could just say this means the hierarchy of humans over animals, but it also includes the earth itself, is in this verse, right? And doesn't it? Over all earth, every creeping thing. It seems that there's a more total. It's not just you're not. Even animals you would never use, you still have dominion over them. And to me, that suggests a certain right to own things. But I could be stretching a little bit. Then verse 27, we saw that already. Verse 28, Vayivarechotam, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and conquer it. That's dominion, maybe, I don't know. Okay. Or do bidgat hayam, and rule over, have dominion over the fish of the sea, of the shemayim, the birds in the skies, and all the animals that walk on the earth. Okay, again, that's the execution of this. So that also, and that you could even say maybe there's an element of dignity as well. Right. So first of all, we receive this blessing from. Every the other animals receive blessings from God as well. But we are told to fill up the earth, rule over it, dominion, etc., etc. There's a certain dignified role that we play in creation. Maybe that's also what you were suggesting about we can use animals. We can use animals for our dignity. Okay, we can use them to serve us and our needs. So maybe even we could say, these verses in Genesis set up a system where humans have a right to life, to property, and to dignity. That's what we're created for. These all flow from our being B'Tselem Elokim, B'Dmut Elokim, in God's image and God's likeness. And therefore we have a right to life, property, and dignity, and responsibilities to protect and defend the life, property, and dignity of other people. Pushing it too much? I don't know. Let's go on. Oh, yeah.
Well, the basic conclusion, no, but drawing it out looks okay.
So do you okay? You have your objections to that you agree that Judaism endorses that. You just don't think that you think I'm reading too much of these verses. Okay, I'll take that for now. Yeah.
Is the word dignity the word you're using because you're channeling later readings?
Yeah. Meaning I think I'm sort of translating that into some sort of maybe political language. Kavod hadam.
Are you like channeling Soloveitchik? Are you I mean,
I read I read the first few chapters of a book which I quote later on by Yehuda Brandis, who wrote a book. It's called Judaism and Human Rights, where he argues that there are two spheres. There's a sphere of universal human rights, rooted first in Genesis and explained in later biblical and Talmudic and halachic writings, and then there's the element of Goy Kadosh U'Melachet Kohanim, a holy nation of priests, and there's the universal element of human rights and the foundations of democracy, and then there's the realm of Kedusha, of sanctity, of separateness, of distinction, of hierarchy even, and these are two realms that exist within the Torah, and the job of halacha is to mediate between these two realms. So that's the theory that sort of is driving much of what I am presenting. And certainly this reading of these verses here is very influenced by it. So those are my cards. Yes.
That's sort of the second pasuk you have here. This is predicated on the fact that if we're created B'Tselem Elohim, this is not. You don't go to the fact that there's sort of a social contract, or that it's actually because of justice.
Mm-hmm.
They're setting down the ground rules about the fact that you can't kill because we're B'Tselem Elohim, not because it's wrong. They don't.
So that's interesting. That's very interesting. So I think
they have the opportunity, right? I mean, this is the very early part of the text.
Yeah. So it's right.
There's no rationale.
Well, there's a rationale.
There is a rationale.
The rationale is like ontological. It's like foundational.
Exactly,
right. This definitionally, human beings have inherent right to life, property, and dignity, not because we all get together and form a social contract and agree to respect those things in each other, but because God made us in that way and wants that to be true. I think, though,
only because you're like God, not because
we're like
something
God.
About killing that is actually wrong.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Which would solve the problem, which I didn't see said, which is that it leads to a spiral of violence.
Okay, I'll also say that even in sort of the Western political tradition, with social contract is also ultimately rooted in this. I mean, at least in some streams of the social contract, is rooted in the idea that there are inalienable rights, that we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, which suggests also sort of there's a first principle that you can't argue. You just sort of you just presume that God made us with rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We can't give those away, and if a politician tries to take it from us, he's a tyrant. So that also is, it's not an argument, it's also, at some point you get to a foundation that you have to sort of assume some things. Okay, source 4 is the Mishnah Sanhedrin. The Mishnah here is discussing how we intimidate witnesses. Okay, we're worried about, maybe in modern courts, witnesses come to testify, we treat them nicely, and we prep them, so that their testimony will be effective. But in the Mishnah, they're concerned that the witnesses will lie, and so you intimidate them to scare them into telling the truth. Listen, they say, look, we'll skip to page 2. Capital cases are not like monetary cases. In monetary cases, a false witness can return the money and achieve atonement, right? I mean, if you testify falsely that Harold owes $500 to Justin, and you're lying, so you can make it up. You can pay the $500, and everything's good. But in capital cases, the blood of the victim and all his future offspring hang upon you until the end of time. Right? There's the guy who's executed based on your false testimony, and his unborn children, who he'll never have because of you. For thus we find regard to Cain, the first murder. What he say? He says, It says, the bloods of your brothers scream out. It says, Dimei achicha tzoakim, the bloods in the plural of your brothers. Why? The verse does not say blood. Eino omer dam achicha, ela dimei achicha, the bloods of your brother, because it was his blood and also the blood of his future offspring screaming out. And you can think, he lived a long time ago, so there are lots and lots of generations of potential future offspring screaming out. Alternatively, his blood was splattered over the trees and the rocks. Okay, there's more than one pool of blood. Okay, either way. Lefikach, the judges continue, therefore, for this very reason, Nivra Adam Yechidi. Okay, this is why people were created alone. L'lamdecha, to teach you shechol ma'aved nefesh achat b'Yisrael. Anyone who causes one Jewish life to be lost, and other, actually, the more accurate versions, I think, leave out the word in Yisrael. Okay, it's a more universal text. Ma'aleh alav ha'katuv ki'ilu aved olam maleh. Okay, cause one life to be lost, an entire world is being destroyed. V'chol ha'makim nefesh achat Israel. Anyone who saves a life, maleh alav ha'katuv, the scripture considers him as though kiyam olam maleh, if he's keeping alive an entire world, because that person is an entire world through their future generations. So that's one reason why humanity was created with one common ancestor, to teach the importance of, right, if all of us are from just one person, so each one of us is the potential to be the future parent of an entire world. The other reason why God created the world through one person is for peace amongst people. No one should say to his neighbor, Abba gadol mi'avicha, my father was more important than your father. We all come from the same person. Everyone fundamentally, at some very basic level, is equal. So the heretics can't say there are many different powers up in heaven, many rulers up in heaven. And also, Lagid Gadlutos, Lakadosh Baruch Hu, also teach about God's greatness. If I make stamps with one, you're making coins, whatever, with more stamps, with one stamp, they're all going to look the same. Each one is different, right? God makes each human being with that form, that stamp of the first human being, of Adam HaRishon, and we all look different. Therefore, each one, every individual, must say, for my sake was the world created. This is like one of the great, I think, humanistic texts in Judaism. Again, the context of intimidating the witness, so the witness won't take another human life lightly. No matter what the pressure's on you, no matter how intimidated you are, whatever the mafia is saying to you, don't say something false under oath, because the life that you are endangering by your false testimony has this infinite value. And that infinite value, again, comes back to our being created through one parent. This divine creation, B'Tselem Elokim, B'Dmut Elokim, is the capacity of each individual to be an entire world, and our differences highlight God's greatness, right? It's not like the differences speak to the fact that the things that the more that we are different from one another, that highlights the fact that the thing that we have in common is that we all come from the same origin, and we're all created in the image of God through, all descendants of one original parent, our parents. Which, right, our differences, the more unlike we are, like they're, yeah.
Seems to imply it's not practical who were infertile, though.
Well, right, the future generation aspect, right, or somebody who has already had a lot of kids, so they're not going to be somebody, yeah. So,
It goes back
That's
to
why
what we
there's only one.
yesterday, or last week, about, you don't have to be the.
oh, good, right, very good. We learned last week, very good, very good. We learned last week that if you take part in raising someone else's child, or teach Torah to someone, right, you're maleh alav ha'katuv, as though it's your child, right? I think if people have influence on the world, thank you. People have influence on the world beyond their own biological children. But the fact that, and yet our biological children is a very concrete way in which each human being has ultimate value, can repopulate the whole world. That's very concrete. But I think even without biological reproduction, there are like manifest ways in which we influence the world into future generations. Okay, comments on this? Okay, so all right.
Sorry,
Yep.
Other than the argument for the fact that we shouldn't kill because they're made, people are made in the image of God, this idea that we shouldn't kill because if we kill, then it's not just him we're killing, but all of the future generation. To me, that seems like a circular argument, though, because, what if it's just more of the same, right? So you're not assigning a value to the actual life. You're just saying, well, there's more of it in the future, so therefore, it's...
I don't know. I think it's just that, there are all sorts of ways to say this guy's a scoundrel, this guy is my enemy, this guy is threatening me. If I don't give his testimony, the mafia is gonna, kill me. So the judges are saying, no, like it's not just this guy, it's like much more than that. And it's, so I think that's the, and then look, the Mishnah quotes it sort of unusually. The Mishnah quotes a drasha, right? It's telling us that there are two reasons why humanity was created from a common ancestor. One is to demonstrate to us that each individual has this ultimate capacity to recreate the world. Every human being is like a new creation for the world. And that's why God created the world through one person originally. And the other reason is first to create peace amongst us, right? The manner of our creation, knowing that story, knowing that first chapter of Genesis should help us get along with one another. Because, what?
It hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked. Well, you don't know how bad it would be without that. It hasn't worked. Okay. It ought to work though, right? Knowing that first chapter in Genesis should help us get along with each other, because none of us are any better than anyone else, and are different. That's the part I think is really, it's like our diversity is just testimony of God's greatness, and just speaks to like the ways in which we're different, our opinions, our appearances, our personalities, all of that. And yet we all come from one parent. Like that is just the greatness and miraculousness of the way God populates the world. And also, so it's God's greatness. It's also, I think, an element maybe of our Tselem Elokim, right? That Tselem Elokim is something that can encompass the diversity of humanity, because that's what we share. And so the things that are different are all facets of that Tselem Elokim. Or it's only, maybe that's, right, a craftsman who's stamping with one stamp, they're all going to be identical. But the element of Tselem Elokim is what enables the diversity to all be from God.
That's why Migdal Bavel is such an amazing story.
That's
so
why the story of
early.
Bavel, right? In Babel, they all spoke the same words and they did the same thing. That was wrong. Like that was like a totalitarian state that maybe they kind of oppressed differences and got everyone in this one project. But that was fundamentally wrong. God had to intervene to uproot that kind of society. Okay. Source 5. Source 5. Okay. I think I'm going to skip source 5. This is from the Sefer Chinuch. He talks about the mitzvah to rescue somebody in danger. Right. This is something also is the Torah has. It's in the Torah. It's not in Western law, in almost any law code. I think almost right. The obligation to intervene and help somebody in danger. There's no obligation in American law. In I think almost every state, maybe Vermont I think is different, I think that's true, to intervene and help somebody in danger. If you see someone drowning and you don't help them, you're not liable, I think in most areas. There's no obligation to intervene to help someone in the Torah. There is an obligation to intervene and help someone. And Sefer Chinuch, which is a medieval book that lists all the mitzvot, when it discusses this mitzvah, connects it to this concept of ki'ilu hu ma'aveh nefesh Yisrael, as though you're destroying one human life, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the obligation to intervene and rescue somebody is connected by the Sefer Chinuch to this ultimate value of human life. So if we say humanity has a right to life and to property and to, if I say life, property, and dignity, so one of the corresponding hashlachot, one of the implications of that right to life is an obligation to actually intervene and protect human life, financially, with your, physically, whatever might be the case.
That kind of seems significant, though, that the impulse is to skip it because it's not linked to Western law when it's.
Oh, maybe we'll skip it.
No, but I mean it's because we're less rights, we're less obligation focused.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, we don't talk
So
about responsibility.
I'll tell you a story. This is a very interesting. This is actually a tremendously interesting halachic dynamic. I'm on a little tangent, but here's the case in Masechet Kiddushin. Talks about Kiddushin, betrothal. Fundamentally, chatan, the willing husband to be, gives an object of value, often a ring, to a kala. each of them have to have intention, consent, to enter into this relationship of betrothal. He gives it to her, she accepts it, it's worth at least a sheva pruta, but the consent of each of them is necessary for kiddushin. She's giving and she's accepting for the sake of entering into being betrothed to him. And you be witnesses also, just to clarify that intent. But he has to give her something of value. So what if he gives her, so the Mishnah and the Talmud, what if he gives her like food and she eats it? So has he given it to her? Well, I don't know. She eats it. So she eats it because she wants to eat. What does that mean? Is she eating it like because does it exist long enough where she keeps eating it as he gives it to her? Like what if each piece is not sheva pruta and he keeps eating them as he gives them to her, Cheerios or whatever, and she never has a sheva pruta in her hand because she keeps eating them one at a time? What if she gives her a loaf of bread and she throws it to a dog that's chasing her? So on one hand, he gives it to her and she throws it away, and maybe she doesn't want to be married to him. On the other hand, no, she's like getting benefit from it because she's using it to save herself from this dog that's chasing her. But he already had an obligation to give that bread to her to save her from the dog. He had a prior obligation to intervene, to rescue from the dog. So he's not actually giving her anything that she wasn't entitled to. Because she was a person in danger, he had to intervene, using his own money to save her from the dog. Okay? There's, I think Rosh Hashanah Arbach, one of the other 20th century posts who discusses a case. Somebody comes to your, knocks on your door, says, I need surgery to save my, I'm raising money for surgery. It's going to be a $250,000 surgery. Rosh Hashanah Arbach, by what right do you not have to sell all your possessions and give him every penny you have to enable him to have that surgery? Because it's true, you don't have to spend more than a fifth of your money to fulfill a mitzvah if it's a positive mitzvah. So if the only etrog in town costs more than a fifth of your income, you could say, all right, I don't have to spend more than a fifth of my income for any positive mitzvah. But to avoid a prohibition, okay, not to violate the prohibition of standing by while your brother's blood is in danger, there's no limit to a prohibition, how much you have to spend. So he grapples with that as a serious halachic question. I don't think, yes?
Maybe to build on that, in the context of what we're talking about, it seems like there's actually a conflict between the right to life, the right to property, and the right to deed. Like, if all those three, there are cases where not all those three things can coexist.
For yourself or for others? I think all of those things, all of those rights have limits. They have limits where they come up against the right of someone else to those things. My right to property can't conflict with your right. Right? I can't own everything in the world because then you won't own anything. So at some point there's going to be...
If you have a right to property and...
Yeah, fine, exactly. Right. My right to property, I'm teaching, I'm this Mishnah class I'm teaching at CJDS on Monday. So we're doing Bava Batra, the second paragraph, right? So it's all about laws of neighbors and it's all about limits on my property rights because of the effect that will have on my neighbors. Right? I can't put certain things in I can't put a dovecot in certain places in my property because it will interfere with my neighbors, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all limits on my property rights for the sake of my neighbors' property, or even their dignity, maybe even also their dignity, I can't, if I'm going to build in such a way that will impair their privacy, that also is a limit. Their privacy puts limits on my property rights. I'm sorry for speaking, you were going to say something.
So that's okay. I was going to say, if you have a right to property, but you can also make the argument, or maybe there's a question whether you should sell all your possessions in order to save the other person's life, then are you therefore revoking your right to property in order to respect the other person's
Good, exactly right. So maybe my right to live even a dignified life with possessions and a home, and a roof over my head, how does that right, exactly. Yeah, no, and it's not just a guy knocking on your door. Now with the internet and you could, any one of us with $5 worth, we could fund a malaria treatment that'll save a life right now, right? And we could even probably get, there's probably a website looking with the name of the person, a life we could save. And so, Peter Singer's written a lot about this, how much right do we have, how much stuff are we ethically entitled to have with the knowledge that every $5 that we donate to malaria treatment or whatever can save a human life. So those are serious questions. My right to live a dignified life. What does that mean, dignified life? How many pairs of shoes do I need? How many, et cetera? Okay.
So what was in that case? What was the outcome?
With the you don't look. I actually don't recall the rationale. I think he comes up with some way to say you don't have to sell all your possessions because that is clear. But I don't remember what the arguments that he makes. But the point is that it's a serious. It's not even says brush it off. Yeah. Okay, what do I want to say? Okay, source 7, okay, so source 6 and source 7. Source 6 says you have to bury the dead, you execute a prisoner, you have to bury him, because a hanging body, the dead prisoner who's just left hanging, it's an affront to God. Tosefta says, why is it an affront to God? Because, so this is in terms of like, what's the image of God? This is a little of a tangent, but, or it's one stream. It seems that it gives the mashal of two twins, one who becomes a king and one who becomes a highwayman, and they catch the highwayman and they hang him up and they impale him and he's hanging by the city gates, and everyone who walks by says, oh, the king is hanging, because they look the same. So that's the mashal. The nimshal is this prisoner who's been executed, whose body is crucified and up on the way. People look and it's like an affront to God. So that is suggesting maybe that the image of God is something about our physical bodies is some, right? You don't have to interpret it that way, but I think it can be interpreted that way. So I sort of leave that for your contemplation. I think it's interesting that the Mishnayot in Sanhedrin, when it discusses the 4 capital punishments that exist in the Torah, stoning, and beheading, and burning, and beheading, none of them are actually done in the way that you would think, right? They're all done in sort of these strange ways that are somehow less like violent to the human form. And so even the Torah has these sort of, whatever, you burn the person. You don't actually, right, you pour molten lead down their mouth. Okay? So it's kind of, it's nasty. I don't want to, but all of the 4 methods are less destructive to the human body than you might think for just reading the biblical verses. So I think that also could be manifestation of this like protecting the human form, and then we bury them right away, right? We bury, right away. So I don't know. And actually, the Talmud says, "You shall love your fellow as yourself." One of the interpretations of that is to choose a nice death for him when you execute him. Baralo misa yafa, a pleasant way to. Yeah.
This might be a little bit of a tangent.
Okay, that's great.
But there's such a humane way of killing an animal, kosher, and yet if we have to take out life,
Yeah, we don't do that.
what we don't. I mean, stoning is probably.
Yeah, so all of them are. Look, they all sound pretty awful to me,
But like the animal should experience no pain. It should be quick.
Yeah. Look, it is I don't know. I mean, it is a punishment. So I don't know if it is a punishment. I don't know. I mean, I think the thrust of rabbinic literature, this is definitely, I think the thrust of rabbinic literature is sort of anti-capital punishment altogether, and the rabbis put such severe limitations. It seems that there's sort of the whole thing is very kind of uncomfortable with it. Whereas shechita is like, that's part of like this sanctified way of life of eating animals, and so that's. Okay, source 8, talking about limits, right? We're told not to eat everything, so that's right in Genesis. In the garden, we're told we can't eat from the Eitz Hadat. That's a limit on our right to dominion over all earth. But you can't eat certain things. So right away there are limits. Source 9, in the garden, what are we supposed to do in the garden? We're supposed to tend it and work it and guard it, right? So our rights, we can't just there's like sort of environmental ethos or some sense of preservation that also is an ecological idea that is there as well in our dominion over the earth. We can't use the earth in a way that destroys it. Okay, so again, right there in those early verses in Genesis, there are limits as well on some of our rights. Right? Again, we can't eat everything, and we have to preserve the world as well. So also in this early chapter, you have limits on rights. Source 10 is the Midrash describing this first murder between Cain and Abel. It's sort of interesting, like we all come from one father, and that's supposed to make peace, and yet the first brothers, kill each, one kills the other. The Midrash gives 3 things that they fight about. 1, they're fighting over money. 2, they're fighting over religion. 3, they're fighting over women. Okay, and that's the 3 sources. These are sort of, I think, maybe 3 kind of theories of what human conflict is about. What do people? Is it about? Is it social issue? Like the women could be more broadly. It's about social status or relationships. Religion is religion, and the first money is sort of interesting, right? That's so fascinating. What are they fighting about? They said, let's divide up the world. The two of you and I, we're 2 brothers. Like the whole earth belongs to us. So let's divide it. So one said, well, I'll take the earth, and you take I'll take the real estate. You take the movable objects. You take the karka, I'll take the metaltalin. So the one took the earth. So one said, the land that you're standing on is mine. The other said, the clothes that you're wearing is mine. He said, take it off. The other said, fly. And because of this, they killed each other. Okay. The other opinion, no, everyone agrees that they each took earth. They just divided, down in the middle. Each took, movables and real estate. Was it? I want the Beit HaMikdash to be my half. The other said, I want the Beit HaMikdash to be my half. That's religion. They fought over that. And the third is there was a woman they wanted to marry, and they fought over that. But the first one in particular, I want to sort of just point out that they're fighting over money, over property, over possessions. Like the whole world, it was just two of them, right? And yet they couldn't share it, which means that the reason, conflict is about. It also comes from our tzelem Eloki, this. We're blessed by God, right? And told to fill the earth, conquer it, have dominion over everything, and that inevitably, that in our nature, that acquisitiveness, that divine mandate to acquire, inevitably brings us into conflict with other people who also have a divine mandate to acquire. And so it isn't scarcity, per se, that makes conflict. It's our nature as human beings and our acquisitiveness. He also wants what's in front of us. Meaning, say more?
They were fighting over the land that they were both on. Yes, they had the entire world, but if they didn't divide it up, one of them would have to go elsewhere.
No, they could just do, you and I, we're going to divide the whole earth. Okay? We'll make a line right here. That half is yours, and that half is mine. Well, because you see it.
Yeah.
We're just trying to think that way. Okay, you could be right, meaning it's hard to think rational because you're tempted by the thing that's in front of you. That could be true. I think that is true. That is definitely true. I mean, it's just a great. I love this story because it's they had everything. They literally had everything. It was just two of them, but they still. But it's really true. It's not. I think it's not about scarcity. I mean, sometimes it's about scarcity, but here it's not only about scarcity. It's about something about ourselves that makes it hard to be limited in that way.
It's even woven into Gan Eden itself. I mean, so it doesn't. It's not. It's pre and post.
How is it pre?
It's because you want.
Right, exactly.
You want
right.
the tree that you can't have.
Exactly. Right, exactly. Okay, source 12. Moving along. Okay. Fast pace. Okay, that's fine. Vote to Rabbi Natan. Another lovely little story. Okay. Everything you do, just like Hillel, should be l'shem shemayim. Do it for the sake of God, for the sake of heaven. What does that mean? When Hillel would leave, going someplace, they would say, "Where are you going?" And he'd say, "I'm going to do a mitzvah." They'd say, "What's the mitzvah?" He'd say, "I'm going to the bathroom." And they would say, "Is that a mitzvah?" And he'd say, "Yes, so that the body's not damaged." Okay, that's a mitzvah. Protecting your body, using the toilet. Very nice. Or he would say, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to the bathhouse." And they would say, "Is that a mitzvah?" And he'd say, "Yes, in order to clean the body." Know that if someone is appointed to polish and clean the statues of kings, they are paid every year and also respected among the great kings. So we who are created in the image of God, how much more so? Right? So there, the divine, this is also a very physical manifestation, right, of our being in the image of God, that we, keep our bodies clean. Like we sort of that dignity of our, not dignity of our bodies themselves, that they should be clean and healthy, right? That is like showing care for something that was created in God's image, right? That even. In Judaism we have sort of an anti-tattoo ethos, and people who, like tattoos say, well, the body is a work of art, it's a canvas, that's why I want to get tattoos. No, indeed the body is a work of art, but it's not your work of art, it's God's work of art, right? And Hillel sort of exemplifies that. Okay, we have 7 minutes. No, I have 10 minutes. I have 10 minutes. Okay, great. Okay, source 13. So this is sort of a thesis statement by an essay that Josh Berman wrote. Josh Berman is sort of like this, he's an academic in, I think, Bar-Ilan University. He studies Bible there. He's like the Orthodox rabbi who's also an academic Bible scholar. That's one of his claims to fame. And his book and a lot of his research is on the political implications of the Hebrew Bible. And his argument is that the Hebrew Bible is a revolutionary document in predicating a sort of basic equality and equal dignity for all people. So in ways that were astonishingly new and counterintuitive, in ways that serve the purposes of no known interest group, the political philosophy of the Torah may be seen to rise like a phoenix Out of the intellectual landscape of the ancient Near East, throughout the ancient world, the truth was self-evident. All men were not created equal. It is in the 5 books of the Torah that we find the birthplace of egalitarian thought. When seen against the backdrop of ancient norms, the social blueprint found in the Torah represents a series of quantum leaps in a sophisticated and interconnected matrix of theology, politics, and economics. The theological breakthrough of the Hebrew Torah is the transformation of the status and standing of the masses, of the common person to a new height, and the elimination of nobles, royalty, and the like. In the Torah, the common man receives an upgrade from king servant to servant king. Right? Because the king in the Torah is not so great to be a king if you're in the Torah, right? Doesn't really get to do all that much. He can't even have horses. Has to carry a Torah around with him all the time. And as well as the foundational equality of all people that we saw in those chapters in Genesis. And the laws of the Torah itself, right? If you compare the Torah to Hammurabi's Code and some of the other ancient Near Eastern codes, you see differences, right? Hammurabi's Code, if killing a slave is a monetary crime against the owner, I believe. Hammurabi's Code, the relatives of a crime victim can be compensated, right, for murder, right, and the murderer gets off, right. It's an offense. Murder is seen as an offense against the family of the victim, not an offense against God or an offense against humanity writ large. Right, and these are and with the discovery of Hammurabi's Code, I think the point that Berman is making is I think somewhat true. You can see these differences. Like Hammurabi's Code is very similar to the Torah, very similar rules, even similar phrasing of certain rules. But the differences really highlight the Torah actually has a fundamentally different worldview. Okay, and source 14 I already alluded to before. Something like these ideas had legs. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with their Creator with certain other rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so. I'm not, the religious identity of the Founding Fathers is the subject of some scholarship and some controversy. It seems we're not particularly religious, at least in America. But I do think I think we can take some pride in the fact that this foundational text of the modern world, the Declaration of Independence, is in fact making a theological claim, right? A theological claim that actually is consistent with the Torah. And I think that is something we can be proud of, and I think it's significant. Am I reading too much into that? Agree? No? Not Rachel?
I was just going to say, even the basis, which is the law, is life, liberty, and property.
Mm-hmm.
So that even supports you more.
Even more, yes, exactly. Even more. Okay, I want to skip source 15 for now. I think we'll come back to it in the next class. I want to end with something a little more dark, okay? This is source 16. Yehuda Mirsky, who he spoke at the shul 2 years ago, colleague of mine, teacher of mine, friend of mine. It's an essay he wrote just a week or two ago. It was a review of a new book that Michael Walzer published. Michael Walzer, the great political theorist and writer, wrote a book called, what's it called? I forget what it's called. It's about Algeria, Israel, and India, 3 countries which won their independence from European colonial rule through secular nationalist means, and secular nationalist political parties, sort of having won that independence, ruled those countries for a period of time, and in each cases were sort of overtaken by the sort of religious fundamentalists who they thought had been, consigned to the dustbin of history. And his book is sort of like, why is it that this like sort of secular nationalism is sort of self-defeating? Why in these cases does it not succeed in sustaining itself? Why do these sort of backward religious people and Walzer claims that the nationalism itself defeats itself, because nationalism is a sort of secular nationalism is kind of a universal, it's sort of ethos. It aspires to, like, every nation sort of more or less wants the same things for itself, and yet nationalism requires respecting and encouraging and enhancing the particular traditions of a particular people, which have religious roots. And so as the nation achieves its independence, as the Congress Party in India or the Labour Party in Israel or whoever in Algeria, as they're feeding the very sources that they had kind of transcended in their secular modernizing efforts. Okay, I mean, in Israel, this is sort of, let's talk about Israel because we know about that, and it's like, right, you have labor Zionism emerging from traditional European Jewry, rejecting traditional European Jewry for the sake of modern secular nationalism, winning independence, building a country, but then discovering that the people whom they'd served and the people whom they had won their independence for actually still felt really connected to, like, Judaism and to these traditions, which then in the next generation, came back and took over the state. That's Waltzer's sort of book. And Yudomirsky, this is a review of that book, says the following: liberalism, like the notion of sovereignty at its heart, rests on a view of human personhood, sovereign, inviolable, sacred, whose historical origins are rooted in theology. Maybe that theology is just a myth, but it's a myth we seem to need, and indeed can't live without. Whether liberalism can endure without those theological understandings and their normative claims is an open question. Walzer credits religion, at times reluctantly, at others appreciatively, with tenacity in the face of secular liberal ideas. Perhaps, however, it is a form of that tenacity that allows secular liberal ideas to exist in the first place. It's a dark comment or a warning a little bit. Like, what is there's a symbiotic relationship. There's between religion and liberalism. Liberalism emerges from a theology, but without that theology can it be sustained? And yet, with that theology, can liberalism survive? So that's the sort of the piece that Mirsky is presenting, and I leave that tonight as a final thought. And thank you so much for coming. You're welcome to stay for late night Marv beginning in a few minutes, and we'll have another class next week. Thank you.